All right, this is it. This is where we begin to go into the scriptures and verify the prophetic events leading up to the return of Christ. And today we're going to start with Revelation chapter 17. We're also going to be touching on chapter 18, chapter 19, and chapter 13, and a verse from chapter 12, all from the book of Revelation. This is a lot of information, but you're going to see how easy it is to understand it. And we have a list of the main things that we cover. There's about like 20 of them. So they're below, and you'll be able to print those out. But we cover a lot of information. And so now, to get us started, what I've done is I found an old clip from about 4 or 5 years ago. And it goes over Revelation chapter 17, 18, 19, 13, and a little bit of 12. And then after that, it's about 11 minutes or so. After that, then we're going to talk about, we're going to go into Revelation chapter 14, just real quick, read a couple of verses out of there. And that's going to be it for today. But we're going to be covering a lot of information. Want you to see how easy it is to be able to follow along and see how important this is. So anyways, let's go ahead and watch the clip, and then we'll carry on after that. This is an exciting chapter because we get to imagine the imagery that John saw and learn the answer about the imagery. In John's vision, he saw a beast that has 7 heads and 10 horns. John also saw a woman who is called a whore sitting on the beast. What could this image possibly mean? Thankfully, in Revelation chapter 17, verse 7, we are told John will be given the answer to the mystery. John wrote, "And the angel said unto me, Wherefore dost thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns." The angel tells John that the woman is a whore, and she represents a city that reigns over the kings of the earth, and that city is located in an area that is surrounded by 7 mountains. The 7 mountains are one of the meanings of the 7 heads of the beast. However, the 7 heads of the beast have another meaning too. The 7 heads also represent 7 kings. John learns that the imagery of the whole beast represents the 8th king. I'll be sharing with you verses from Revelation chapters 12, 13, and 19, showing that this 8th king is a man who gets the power, seat, and authority of Satan. By the way, this man is alive today. However, he has not been given those powers yet. The 8th king not only gets the power, seat, and authority of Satan, he will also go and fight against Christ when Christ returns in power and glory. We also learn that the 10 horns of the beast are 10 kings that give their power to the 8th king, and together they go to fight against Christ too. Knowing that there was a succession of 8 kings leading up to the return of Christ made me very curious to know which of the 8 kings is ruling today. Don't you want to know the answer to that too? Although Revelation chapter 17 doesn't give the answer as to which of the 8 kings is in power today, it does help us to know the answer, which we go over in part 3. Be sure to look over the printouts and information on this God in Our Future Part 1 page. Have a prayer in your heart. Feel for the calm, peaceful feelings of the Holy Ghost to witness of truth as truth is being taught. And now, let's begin. Revelation chapter 17. And there came one of the 7 angels, which had 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, and I will shew unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. And upon her forehead was the name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, and abomination of the earth. And I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints, and with the blood of the martyrs of Jesus. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore dost thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman, and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast that thou sawest was, and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wander, whose names were not written in the book of life, from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. That's a very interesting phrase, isn't it? The beast that was, and is not, and yet is. We find a correlation between this verse and Daniel chapter 11, and we cover that in part 5. So be sure to take a look at that and see what the meaning is behind that phrase. Let's continue with verse 9. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. Here on the chart we have the 7 mountains, and on the 7 mountains is the city, and the woman represents the city that is sitting on these 7 mountains. Let's go with verse 10. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. Why did the angel say that the 6th king is? It's a really important hint that helps us, again, to make more connections and correlations as we go into Daniel chapter 11. In verse 11 we read, And the beast that was, and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. So here, the angel was just talking about 7 kings, and now we learn that the beast is the 8th king, and he's the one that goes into perdition. In Revelation chapter 13, verse 1, we read, And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as a mouth of a lion. And the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. So who is the dragon that gives the beast his power and his seat and his great authority? We learn in Revelation chapter 12, verse 9, that it says, And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So it's this beast that gets power from Satan to be able to have Satan's power, seat, and authority. Now, we think of how evil and powerful Satan is. Think of how powerful this individual, this 8th king, is going to be when he is given the power, seat, and authority of Satan. That is one person we're going to be wanting to stay completely away from. Now, in Revelation chapter 19, verse 20, we read of the demise of this 8th king, the beast, when Christ comes back in power and glory. In verse 20 we read, And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, and which had deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire, burning with brimstone. And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse,
which sword proceedeth out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. So at the time that Christ comes back in power and glory, the beast, the eighth king, and the false prophets, and those who had gone to fight against Christ, they're destroyed. And now what we're going to be looking for is going back to Revelation chapter 17. We're going to pick it up on verse 12, and we're going to read about part of the group that's destroyed, and that is the group of the 10 kings. In verse 12, we read, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast." So during the time that the 8th king is in power, then 10 other kings are going to receive power as king at that time, and they're going to give their power to the 8th king. In verse 13 we read, "These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. And these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful." And he said unto me, "The waters which thou sawest, where the whore sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. For God hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast until the words of God shall be fulfilled." This is such an interesting verse to me, because here these 10 kings apparently have no interest to love and serve God, and yet here we read that God is going to put in their hearts things to fulfill his will. So even though they have no intentions to wanting to do the will of God, they're still going to be doing the will of God. They're just not aware of it. And that is the amazing thing. In our life, we can love and serve God, and we can receive our blessings, or we can rebel against him, and God will still use us to fulfill his will, and we don't get the blessings. I think I want to go with the first way. What about you? Okay, verse 18. "And the woman which thou sawest is that great city which reigneth over the kings of the earth." So that city may exist today. However, the time in which this city reigns over the kings of the earth is still in the future.
Welcome back. I told you there was going to be a lot of information covered, and there was, wasn't there? Again, you're going to be able to digest it a little bit more as you go through the points below and look what was covered. But reading through the prophetic playbook story was a great help for you too. So that's another resource that we have. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring up Revelation chapter 14, and I want to point out a couple of verses from that, and then we're going to wrap this show up here for today. In Revelation chapter 14, I wanted to bring out about verse 9, 10, and just take a look at them and let's see how important it is that we do not take on the mark of the beast and worship his image. And verse 9, it says, "And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up for ever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name." Can you see how important it is that we do not accept the mark of the beast? Can you see that this is something that we need to pay attention to now, because we don't want to be caught up to where we have to choose between taking the mark of the beast or being killed. No, if we can avoid that, that would be awesome. And so let's go ahead and take a look at the chart here. You know, we've talked about the succession of the 8 kings that is mentioned in Revelation chapter 17. We talked about the 8th king getting the power, seat, and authority of Satan and going to fight against Christ when Christ returns in power and glory. We talked about the city that sits on 7 mountains, and the city is going to reign over the kings of the earth. And that city has to do with the mark of the beast, where the hub of the city is. The city is where the hub of the evil monetary system is going to be. And we know that city is going to be destroyed, and we know that we're not supposed to take on the mark of the beast. Significant information. In the next video, we're going to be talking about which of the 8 kings is alive and ruling today. Where is he? What's his name? What prophetically has he done? What is he going to do? And you know what? You know, you've probably been reading the book, The Prophetic Playbook Story. We're going to be talking about this is a moment in time in which the United States is referenced in 2 chapters of the Old Testament regarding this very moment in time. And the insight that we gain is phenomenal. But tomorrow, or in the next video, we're going to talk about one of those 2 chapters. And the insight is absolutely amazing, but it's so important. It's good news, it's bad news, it's horrific news, it's amazing news, and so much more news. And it's so important because it's our time now, this moment now. And we're going to be able to take a look to see, okay, what do we do with this information? Do we just read it and then put it back on the shelf? Or do we read it and do we work with God to do something with it? Yes, that's what God wants us to do. That's why He's given us this information. It's so important that we recognize that God gave us this message about our time, and He gave it to us so that we could use it to work with Him, to be blessed by Him, to bless our family, our loved ones, and our country. And how can we do that? What can we do? We got to learn these insights, and we got to prayerfully work with God to know what does He want us to do individually. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next video. Ever so important video.